Today, Open Source Security is talking to Josh Corman, cyber safety philosopher warrior. Josh is a legend in the U.S. public sector and I'm actually really excited for you to be here, Josh, because I know an enormous amount of this audience is not in the U.S. as well as not plugged into public policy. So you have an amazing amount of knowledge and experience to share with us. So welcome to the show, man. I am very excited.
Thank you. I love the episodes of yours I've heard, and I think this is overdue. We should maybe do it on an interval.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. And for the people listening, so when I talked to Casey Ellis like a month ago, he mentioned something called the 5 Ps. Josh is the person who made them up. So that is very exciting.
I'm just observing patterns, and philosophers like consonants and alliteration. So it was actually pretty important when I Am the Cavalry launched. So what is it? Almost 13 years ago on August 1st.
Yeah.
We said we had to lead with empathy, being a helping hand instead of pointing finger. And as we started to engage these safety regulated industries where bits and bytes meet flesh and blood, they didn't understand why good faith hackers would report issues to them. They thought it was extortion, or they wanted money or fame. So I had to kind of come up with a really simple way to show that, hacking isn't a crime. It's magic. There's good wizards and bad wizards. Thank goodness we have Hermione and Gandalf and Harry Potter to fight the dark arts. But also amongst us, we don't all agree. We're all motivated differently as a protector, a puzzler, prestige, profit, or protest / patriotism.
Yeah.
And boy, did that melt their anxiety to see, oh my goodness, if you're losing sleep because we don't fix a medical device issue because you think people might die, we're making your job really hard. And we said, yes, you are. So yeah, that was a pretty, I think, rhetorical, accessible, short lists, odd-numbered lists, lists that either rhyme or have parallelism or consonants or alliteration. We'd have a lot of knowledge in cybersecurity, but we are not incredibly effective communicators or storytellers. And that is a very important part of being successful in the public policy arena.
Yeah, we are terrible communicators. I mean, even amongst ourselves, I think we're terrible communicators.
Yeah.
It's a hard skill. I'm not going to fault us for being, terrible or anything like that. But yes, I agree with you 100%.
Which are you, by the way? Which do you major in? Which do you minor in for protector, puzzler, prestige, profit?
Oh, protector and puzzler for sure. Yeah, that's always been my thing. It was funny. Josh and I, before we hit record, Josh mentioned like profit was not the motivation. And an enormous number of people have made quite a lot of money off many of Josh's ideas. So thank you, sir, for the hard work.
I call myself an idiot altruist.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, you have a Captain America shield behind you, which kind of fits. It fits.
This was my view at CISO. So when I was meeting gubbies who didn't want to work with a whippersnapper from the private sector, it became an icebreaker on, can't wait to combine my powers with your powers. Like, what gets you out of bed in the morning?
Right.
Stuff like that.
Yeah. Look, the government's a great example of that, right? Like virtually everyone working in public sector, they could make a ton more money if they went into the private sector, but for whatever reason, they choose to stay and do their thing. It's probably, I assume, patriotism is the P driving a lot of that, but yeah.
So
All right,
I'll have to listen to Casey's episode.
It was good. It was fun. We talked a lot about just vulnerability disclosure, this was right after Glasswing kind of happened.
Oof.
Which is, I know you have some thoughts on that. So maybe let's dive into Glasswing, man. I think that this is a perfect spot to just do that, because I know you were mentioning some things you will say complaints you have about it, which I completely agree with.
Look, I'm a lover, not a fighter, or a little bit of a fighter, but I fight for righteous things, and I try to fight with,
nice,
inspire people
you're
to
a philosopher warrior, Josh.
Sure. That might stick with some people. It might get mocked by others. But we're kind of jumping towards some of the end here. But look, I've been working on where bits and bytes meet flesh and blood formally since we launched the Cavalry. It was usually on top of my day jobs, but at times I've had to pause my private sector career to either go run cyber statecraft, the Atlantic Council nonprofit, or do a congressional task force on healthcare. Or during the pandemic, I went into CISA for 18 months to the day to run Operation Warp Speed security and keep hospitals and water afloat. So I am very much focused on where bits and bytes meet flesh and blood. And right now it's my full existence in a nonprofit initiative funded by Craig Newmark called Undisruptable 27. It's around Volt Typhoon is a Chinese military operation in U.S. water, power, transportation, comms to keep us out of their fight with Taiwan. And it's very high consequence, very high stakes. No water is no hospital in
Yeah.
2 to 4
Yeah.
hours. So, here I am focused on an incredibly hard thing that the government probably should be doing instead of civil society. It's going pretty well. Our theory of change is getting traction. We could talk about that. I hope to talk about that. But while my eye is on the prize for like a 2027, 28, 29 conflict over Taiwan with China, we now have Iran more
Yeah.
active on U.S. water, given the war and the conflict. And then Mythos. I know Mythos is just a flashpoint. It's, yes, exquisite marketing and a real substantive public recognition that we've crossed some thresholds in AppSec and product security,
Yeah. Yeah.
in asymmetry between the ease of offense versus the ease of defense. And when I saw Glasswing about to be announced and ultimately announced, my first instinct was a little different than the most of the takes you've heard. It was, for the love of God, please tell me you have major OT ICS players in there.
Yes.
So OT is, unlike IT or information technology, OT is operational technology. It's the things that go boom or explode or move physics, not information. So programmable logic controllers, industrial equipment, robots on a manufacturing assembly line, HVAC. There is no IT without functioning OT.
Yeah. Yeah.
But like the big names that you would see in Glasswing, some of them kind of made sense if we were only in an IT exposure. But many of those same vulnerabilities that Mythos and its peers, plus or minus a few generations with harnesses, can now find and weaponize, are also going to affect cyber physical damage in lifeline functions like water, like power, like food supply, manufacturing. So, one of the tenets of buying the cavalry is malicious intent is not a prerequisite to harm. So even if the people leveraging these tools aren't attempting to hit a U.S. water plant, they may hit that, and no water is no hospital in 2 to 4 hours. So,
Right. Right.
so I was quietly saying, are there any OT ICS? The answer was no. I said, I will voluntarily provide you a list of the most important starting points or watering holes to get amplification. And that was slow. And then you saw, other manifestations of this where, what was it, OpenAI had their version and they're like, oh, you think Mythos is dangerous? Hold my beer.
Yeah. Right. Right.
We're going to give this to everybody with an email address. And if the whole point was to give a preview for defenders and a head start for 100 days, that theoretically undermines that. But even though OT people I saw trying to get in there were pretty much on hold in a waiting room, if you don't already know tip of spear models and how to use them, there was a really big divide. Like the help you were getting from the frontier labs were for people that they were already very tightly working with.
Yeah.
So it's not malicious, but by omission, I'm like, okay, what about cyber physical things that underpin society? What about public safety, human life? And even on the IT/OT column split, where there was nobody in OT, they were the haves, not the have-nots. They were the top cream of the crop. Like the
Yeah. Right.
supply
Right.
chain down market for either is either unsupported end of life, out of business, or difficult to patch, or the smaller IT and OT teams. So the presence of a patch available is part of the completion. But until that patch is applied everywhere through the operational environment, no one's safe. So if you're in a foot race between discovering the latent flaw, weaponizing the latent flaw, creating a vaccine for the latent flaw in the form of a patch, and deploying said patch to affected areas, Glasswing was only aimed at the head start to create a patch. And down market, especially in OT, you might only have one change management window a year.
Right. Yes. Well, and look, this is something that I know in IT we struggle with, because obviously we have patches for our computers. We update our computers. Generally, things are fine. Even if we screw it up, we have maybe an hour of downtime, and then we fix it and whatever. We write a report. Versus when you have a water system or a power plant or a hospital, an hour of downtime could be like literally people dying, right?
Mm.
And that's hard to wrap my head around sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, there's different scenarios we could double click on, but when we started cybermedsummit.org, that's a 501c3. We found 2 hackers that grew up going to DEF CON, went to med school,
Wow.
and became physicians. And they said, hey, a lot of the stuff you talk about with the cavalry, hacking a pacemaker for 90-something% of people would just make them tired. It's not a big deal. I'm like, should I stop working on this? And they said, no, you could absolutely kill people, just not the way you're talking. So we started to lean in, and we went,
Wow.
we went to doctors, just like pilots do flight simulators. Doctors do these things called ER simulations
Ah.
on a regular interval. They just come in, what do you do when there's a pregnant woman who needs a defibrillator? There's 2 heartbeats. So it's known, but rarer. So you'll come into a simulation, and you'll test your drills with an actor and surgical dummies. And it's very real and very palpable. But it makes sure that, most of the time, they say most of the time it's a horse, but sometimes it's a zebra. So that those edge cases when you should be kicking
Right.
in some critical thinking on, is this a horse or a zebra? So we started doing those. And part of that was we had some extra time. We're like, let's just do a ransomware simulation. In round 1, we'll take out the hospital's building automation. In round 2, we'll do the same thing for all the hospitals in Phoenix, Arizona. And in round 3, we'll do an Arizona Diamondbacks bombing, like a Boston Marathon bombing. So you have elevated need with diminished capacity. And we knew at some point they'd probably flip to something called crisis standards of care, where instead of if you and I both walk into the ER at the same time, and you've got a scratch on your face and I got a major arterial bleeder in my leg, they're going to go for me.
Yeah, right.
Whereas in a crisis standards of care, they're going to say, Josh is going to die. It's moral to fix those that can be treated.
Right.
So you'll get a color-coded badge or tarp that you're put on. And so we knew they'd flip to that. But what we didn't think of, our biggest surprise in our very first CyberMed Summit, was it was 117 degrees out. And by shutting off the building automation with a a default maintenance password, HVAC went down. And since HVAC went down in an all-glass building in 117 degrees heat, we had 45 minutes to evacuate the building, including people in comas, recently had surgery. It's an oven. It's inhospitable for humans.
Right. Wow.
So, there's other stats we often throw around that are real, like, 4.4 minute delay for hearts can affect mortality rates for heart conditions. 1, 3, or 4 hours enough to be a life or death fork for stroke or brain. There's the golden hour for other maladies that are time sensitive. So delayed integrated care does and has led to loss of life and worsened outcomes. So when you add cyber to these things, we're now creating more exposure to accidents and adversaries that can affect those outcomes.
This is mind-boggling, and this is like it's also for anyone listening. There is an article I will put in the show notes on Wired that literally just came out a little while ago about the water system in the U.S. that Josh has quoted, and I'm not ready yet. And I told him, like, I haven't read this yet because when I saw the headline, I know it's going to be in it, and I don't want to read it. Like, I know what this is going to say, and like your hospital story is like the same thing. It's like, oh my goodness, this is so much worse than I expected, but. It's just like, it's mind-boggling to me. Like, okay, so actually here's a question for you. And this goes both ways, right? You tell these stories, I read these articles, and it feels like I need to go live in a cave because everything is terrible. But at the same time, like, society is functioning. Like, I can currently go to a hospital. I pay my bills online. Like, I have water coming out of my tap. And I think this is one of the challenges as well, is a lot of people will say, you're just making this crap up. You're crying wolf. You're trying to scare me. Right? Because like there's a dichotomy here that I definitely have to struggle with.
So, I mean, let's get philosophical, okay? I've had a lot of projects over my career, some of which, caused you and I to meet in the AppSec and product security world and SBOM. And the through line, even before Cavalry, was I believe and have believed, and it's getting worse. So it's been always true, but the degree matters, that as humans, as a species, we tend to adopt technologies for their immediate and obvious benefit, but we're really bad at the delayed, less obvious costs of those benefits. So we tend to race to embrace something and only later find out, oh, asbestos is bad, or, oh, libidomide causes birth defects, or, oh, this thing, maybe you shouldn't make deep sea submersibles out of, carbon fiber. So we, on the whole, most of these tech adoptions work out pretty well, but some of them have less obvious costs. Just look at social media and its effect on
Yeah.
our youth, or
Yeah.
mobile phones, or epidemics of loneliness and whatnot. So zooming out, as I started eyeing the cavalry, which became more about public safety, human life, just not just impacts on society, the idea was that our dependence on connected technology was growing faster than our ability to secure it. We were struggling to protect credit cards and websites. What made us think the
Yeah.
same vulnerable software was appropriate for connected medical devices, cars, high-speed rail, factories, oil and gas pipelines. And the nascent cybersecurity industry, at least from the outside, projected that we had things mostly under control. But the truth is, we've been prey, we just lack predators with the right appetites. And most of our failure modes were within tolerable limits for the confidentiality of information. And I was worried that those same weaknesses could allow modes for the unavailability of time-sensitive medical care, or for cyber physical damage of pipelines, or for a crisis of confidence in the public to trust connected self-autonomous vehicles. So it's not that we couldn't be hacked, it's that we lacked hackers that wanted cyber physical damage. So we would increasingly, as that dependence rose, then we would say, okay, through our overdependence on undependable things, we've created the conditions. This exposes us to accidents and adversaries. So accidents meant things like the CrowdStrike glitch. It wasn't even a hack,
Yeah.
but that glitch took out lots of air travel, lots of medical care across the country, some quantified in a peer-reviewed study on its 1-year anniversary last summer, also in Wired. When you're overdependent on an undependable thing, you're taking a gamble, and we continue to push more and more and more and more dependence, but we haven't made the digital infrastructure proportionally dependable. You and I are both very much embroiled in the SBOM plus community.
Yeah.
But one of my lines made it into Biden's lips in Executive Order 14028. If you read the opening, it says something at the end of, in the end, the trust we place in our digital infrastructure should be proportional to how trustworthy and transparent that infrastructure is, and to the consequences we will incur if that trust is misplaced. And there's a lot baked into that, because I'm a disciple of the amazing Dan Geer. So there's a lot to unpack in there. But that is the rub here, is that software is not nearly as dependable as steel and concrete, but we're increasingly depending upon it in more and more places, and in more dangerous places. And unless and until we right-size dependence to dependability, we're seeing a growth here. I think the real Rubicon we've crossed is most of our predators wanted money or information, and they were stealthy and they were quiet. We are now in an era of disruption and destruction. And these articles, if you read the Wired one, we haven't really described it, but Typhoon is a People's Liberation Army set of units that has deliberately compromised U.S. infrastructure, laying in wait for a time and place of their choosing, because they want to keep us out of the fight with Taiwan. It's to do two things. It's to delay and degrade forced mobilization, which is the movement of troops and equipment to the war theater even a day or two. And the second reason is they want to sow chaos on civilian infrastructure, or undermine public support for our intervention overseas. And that latter one is outrageous in the intentions of international law and our laws of armed conflict. But it's in this really interesting gray space where we don't know how to do something until they actually detonate. So they're sitting there like a digital bomb, but they're also not done any harm yet. And people their imagination fails them to say, how did this happen? And they're often getting in through KEBs or known exploited vulnerabilities in security products or edge products.
Oh, I know, right?
And it's, shame on us as a cyber industry to allow people to believe that we mostly had cyber tamed. And shame on us for, the cobbler's kids have no shoes, that the things we buy to keep bad guys out of our homes are the things letting them into our homes. And while, maybe you don't think the Chinese military would pull the trigger, they're certainly on public record in unclassified hearings and information in U.S. water facilities, for example. And I'm not comfortable living under sword of Damocles that like where they can hold us hostage because we've allowed ourselves to be so prone. So a lot of the project work is what's realistic in the time frame we have to buy down risk, and how do we do ruthless prioritization. But it should be unarguable that we are overdependent on undependable technology, which exposes us to accidents and adversaries. But this patch, unlike the others, whether it's China, Iran, Russia, if they pick a fight with us, they have the means, motive, and opportunity. The question is, do they have the will to use it? And as we get into a Mythos era, Mythos plus plus, you're now democratizing. A whole lot more players are as powerful as maybe nation states to disrupt and destroy, even if that's not their intention.
Okay, so I have maybe a vaguely related question. Is you just mentioned a whole bunch of the cyber just kind of adversaries,
Yeah.
specifically on water.
Yeah.
But like there are a multitude of examples. This is across the board of like Western countries attacking, Eastern countries of every country attacking almost everyone else. It feels like using some sort of cyber attacks. And yet there doesn't seem to be any sort of response most of the time. It feels like we're just like, well, I guess China attacked us again. And it's like, what? I mean, and we do the same thing, right? Where the Iran centrifuges are another one where it was almost certainly a Western country that did that. And it's like, well, I guess that happened. Like it feels so weird to me that all of these things keep happening. And we're like, okay.
I mean, we could have a multi-hour podcast on just that. I can tell you how it happened, what order it happened in, and what the seminal moments were. But we have a Geneva Convention for physical things and international norms and treaties. We don't. There was a deliberate pushback on introducing a Geneva Convention for cyber. I'm going to give you the very fast version here. And a lot of the U.S. Five Eyes allies, countries, and NATO didn't want to maybe limit our possibility space,
right,
and be hoisted by our own petard. So people deliberately dragged their feet on introducing a Geneva Convention for cyber. There was actually one of Andy Greenberg's stories on NotPetya is most of the people that matter for the international UN, NATO, cyber brain trust were all together in Tel Aviv for Cyber Week in person when NotPetya hit. I was actually delivering a 12-minute keynote on stage, and at minute 8, NotPetya hit, and everyone's phones and pagers lit up.
Wow.
So we had a big fight the next day at the Munich Security Conference roadshow, and the Russians were there in the room as part of the fight.
Oh my goodness!
And I was one of the only ones that had the boldness to say, I know you don't want a Geneva Convention for cyber, but for the love of God, can we please have a no-fly zone for hospitals? That any cyber munitions used intentionally or otherwise that affect hospitals should be a war crime. And so those things made it into the book and the Wired article. But for a while we didn't want to do this. McChrystal during the Obama era said any attacks on designated critical infrastructure, even if they start in cyber, our response can be made outside of cyber. So that was floated as a concept, but not enforced later when tested. And, cyber is a weird place to use munitions. When you drop a bomb, the rough yield and the rough blast radius.
Right.
But, NotPetya, for example, was a nation state, Russia, against a military target in Ukraine. It was designed to stay isolated to Ukraine, but it escaped its intended blast radius and did $1 billion of damage to Merck in the U.S. And elsewhere. It did the Maersk impact was a total of $10 billion estimated the first day between the various victims. So cyber munitions and cyber physics are a weird beast. And as such, I think it's a very dangerous weapon to use and shouldn't be, or we should have the right incentives to do so. And that, like I said, it could be an entire episode on how we got there. Some of those very same people that push back on baby steps towards norms are now in this Volt and Salt Typhoon era, wishing they had, they're expressing regrets publicly. But the bottom line is, we for the time being, are over-dependent on this undependable stuff. It exposes us. The next conflict will be a hybrid conflict. Just like, if you can use drones, you will use drones.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
There is some use of cyber in Ukraine. There's some use elsewhere. We have not yet crossed that threshold. I hinted in the article and on this chat, or at least our pre-chat, the Typhoon's pre-positioning nonsense language, the fact that there hasn't been damage yet or payload, they've done everything but that. Like if you and I, we have families, we have homes. If someone broke into our house and didn't steal anything yet, it's still breaking and entering.
Right.
And if someone sets up the ability to destroy and sabotage your water plant or your boiler, it's still, sabotage attempt, whether they succeeded or not. And yet our policy thresholds are really, we balk and we hesitate that it hasn't crossed the unacceptable threshold. But there's even a public 60 Minutes piece on Littleton, Massachusetts, a town with about 10,000 people, no military, no manufacturing. They're just small town America, which is the point of Volt Typhoon. But they found it and they temporarily evicted it, but it hadn't done damage. So even the news cycle has a hard time covering things that haven't, quote, done damage yet. So what you'll find if you read that article is the entire insurance industry wanted to be tested on something like Volt Typhoon at a national scale. So we ran a simulation, invited Andy to watch Chatham House, Andy Greenberg. And that's what the story is how that played out. And hint, it's pretty bad.
I know what I'm gonna read it after this, but man. Okay. All right, Josh. So let's do this, right? We're kind of coming to the end here. And I think you just scared at least me half to death with all of this. And it does sound dire, but give us hope, right? Make me able to go back to work and not just curl up in a ball under my desk for the rest of the day.
So one of the threads we pull in on disruptable27.org, or you can even just go to u27.org. And
I will put a link in the show notes.
I made it easier because no one can spell undisruptible. So u27.org will get you there. But we likened it early in the first year. We're wrapping up basically the second year of funding from Craig Newmark of Craigslist. The idea was when a hurricane's going to make landfall, you don't say, well, let's not tell anybody because they can't stop it anyhow, right?
Yeah.
So when it comes to a natural disaster, then what you do is you tell them what you know, you tell them what you don't know, you inform, influence, inspire. You have to level with people. You never want to exaggerate it, and you never want to downplay it and coddle them. You have to treat them like adults. So one thread here is this is a lot more like unnatural disasters concurrently in a man-made capacity that exceeds our response capabilities. So that's one thread. The other is you have to meet people where they are, use their love language. So we've been saying when everything's critical, nothing is, and we've really prioritized the things that if they're shut off for 24 to 48 hours, people die, or there's societal, psychological impact. So we looked at the nexus of water and hospitals, and there's 151,000 water facilities in the U.S., but only 420 of them are in the ISAC. So there's really no public-private partnership yet. There's no.
Wow.
You have more regulation for your PCI DSS credit card than you do for water. And instead of saying, let's just become overwhelmed, there's only 6,000 of those water facilities that support a hospital. So we're really surgically focused on, we're going to innovate narrowly with 12 U.S. hospitals, replicate why these are the other 6,000, and take the recipes and blueprints we made and give them to everyone else so they can do the same for their top priority. And it sounds overwhelming, but where the threat comes from cyber, what we're heartened by is that our approach is the solutions come from engineering. And I don't mean software engineering. I mean physical engineering. We're stealing lightweight practical pieces from Idaho National Labs, cyber and front engineering. And what we're saying is if you can cause a water hammer to burst a water main on Main Street, what's the mitigation against that? Well, there's physical mitigations, and we found that for under $10,000 in a hospital town, we can implement engineering mitigations that the engineers in town know how to do. They're familiar, effective, and affordable. And it won't stop you from getting hacked, but it will stop the highest consequence failures. And I think the solution for our space is we need to get a reckoning and a soul searching on how do we better articulate credibly and honestly how the risks of overdependence on undependable technologies. How do we stop overstating our defensive capabilities and mitigations? In the areas where we are over dependent, we should look first to engineering resilience mitigations and then start to crawl, walk, run on more effective and reasonable cyber steps. So I want to stop the bleeding with engineering and then pivot to a more informed and right-sized risk decision on dependence and dependability.
This is a really interesting way to look at this that I don't think I've ever even really thought about. Because I mean, as a IT security type, every solution is an IT problem, right? Like everything. I'm going to fix it with all the security problems we're going to fix with technology, right?
Yeah.
But you're talking about like in meat space using meat space solutions to technology problems, which is not something my brain knows what to do with even at this point.
Well, I got to come up with a better analogy, but like you've heard the old expression when you're holding a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
Yes, correct.
So we try to treat every cyber threat with a cyber fix. And sometimes the more rational choice is if every time I touch this wire, I get shocked, stop touching the wire, right? It could be, some of these 151,000 water facilities, there's really 55,000 that are 365 days a year. They're called community water facilities. Out of these, some of them aren't yet connected, and maybe they should stay that way. Some of them
seriously.
recently connected, but they have no budget or time or expertise for cyber, so they may want to practice downtime, manual operations.
Yeah.
Some of them are so over-dependent on AI and services and cloud-enabled automation, they couldn't go back to manual if their lives depend on it, and their lives literally might. So we're trying to at least be honest with them to say, we have a new predator, we have new hazards. We have more than one new predator, but we have new predators, we have new hazards. Here's your cost benefit. You are in the best position to decide if you should reduce dependence, add engineering, add cyber, maybe a little both. But we can't coddle people, lie to people, sell them snake oil. We will still try to, but we're in a place now where the consequences aren't just like, vendor FUD and vendor snake oil can continue to dominate. We actually have to look at least in safety regulated industries, life safety, cyber physical systems. We need a better version of cyber advice that starts with resilience, safety, and engineering, and then weaves in more candid, more honest, more effective advice than we have given to date. We might have gotten away with it pre-Mythos era, but playtime's over. We're going to have to make some adjustments, and I hope that we make intelligent ones soon enough. And at least for inspiration, Undisruptible 27 might show the way. We also testified to the House recently, so I have a couple links or videos I can give you there. But
yeah.
Their first instinct was, how do we get cyber talent into water? And I said, please don't, not yet. First things first.
Yeah, I watched your testimony. It was phenomenal.
Thank you. Yeah.
And you always do a good job. And I feel like you have that talent to speak to lawmakers using language they obviously understand, because that's a hard skill. Like, you think talking to normal people's hard. Like, talk to a lawmaker sometime.
And look, government is frustrating. Government is slow. Government is currently broken. I wish CISA was better funded. I wish different decisions were made. Europe has its own strengths and weaknesses too, but I'm really impressed with them that in a pretty nonpartisan way, they ask really good questions. The original purpose was, how do we get more cyber into long-term research and development grants and labs? But they pivoted very quickly to say, oh, wow, this could hurt people now. It was pretty impressive. We tend to think of the Congress people say the internet is a series of tubes and we make fun of them. But now we've connected the internet to a series of actual water tubes, and they're actually bursting if our adversaries choose to do so. So I think we're living in interesting times. For the protectors and puzzlers listening, there is a really incredible opportunity here to test yourself, redo critical thinking, take your boredom and apply it to something that might protect your household, your town, your state, or even your country. We will figure this out. It's just how much blood and treasure is lost until we
Yes.
do. And I'm
Yes.
a warrior. I'm fighting I'm not giving up. I'm not hiding in a hole. I think what we did is we experimented on what can work. And now that we're seeing it work, we're going to ramp up our public education of, yes, it's scary, but you are not powerless. Here are some things you can do.
Nice. And I think that's a huge deal, because I think it's easy to just say there's nothing we can do. Oh, well, let's give up. And that sucks.
Well, at a minimum, you and your household can make sure that you have 3 weeks of water on hand, whether it's water filtration like life straws or purification, so that maybe you reduce the drain on your town as they do their natural response. It may take longer than people think, but there's other things you can do. Like we're going to start equipping at B-Sides Las Vegas. We have a 2.5-day track in the cavalry room where we're going to give people shovel ready, actionable. Here's 5 questions you can ask town hall.
Nice.
Here's resources and blueprints you can share. We had to be quiet while we were building them, but now we're going to start ramping them up. And as far as the
this
OT,
is coming out at B-Sides Las Vegas, which is in what, like about a month from when we're speaking?
Yeah,
at
it's
the
the
moment?
first week of August, so about a month from now. Yeah, depends on when you post this.
We'll keep this will be pretty close to that. So anyone listening, I'll update the show notes with whatever the link is after the fact.
We live stream, so you can get it for free.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Nice. That's really cool. Holy cow. I can't wait to see that. That's going to be awesome, man.
Yeah, there's lots to talk about and lots to do, but I hope cyber I hope we stop having the old tired arguments and trying to hold on to the past. We have higher consequences now. We have more indifferent predators now, and thanks to AI tools, we have more people able to fight in that weight class. So we're going to have to make adjustments. I hope they're informed, rational, safety biased adjustments. And I hope you can use your platform to help cause those conversations and spread the word.
Amazing. I'm calling it. Like, that's it. I think that's the best ending we could possibly have, Josh. Thank you so much, man. I've learned an amazing amount. I can't wait for you to come back and hopefully give us good news next time.
Tell me how you liked the Wired article. It was a risky adventure. So
amazing. All right.
Bye.
All right. Thanks, Josh.